High General Trock of the Galactic Federation stood at his ship's viewport, watching Earth grow larger as they approached. His scaled hands clasped behind his back, for eyes narrowing as he considered his mission. The humans had joined the Federation just 5 years ago, and now they wanted to contribute to the Federation's military forces. His job was to assess their military training facilities and determine if their soldiers could meet galactic standards. "Quite primitive looking, isn't it?" his aide, Lieutenant Morale, remarked as they entered Earth's atmosphere. Their buildings barely reached the clouds. Trock didn't respond. He had learned long ago not to judge species by their apparent technological level. The humans had surprised everyone by achieving faster-than-light travel despite their relatively young civilization. Who knew what other surprises they held? The shuttle landed at West Point Military Academy, one of Earth's premier military training institutions. A small welcoming committee waited on the landing pad, 3 humans in crisp blue uniforms adorned with golden insignia. Trock recognized Colonel James Miller from the briefing files, the Academy's commanding officer. "Welcome to Earth, High General," Miller said, offering a perfect Federation salute. "We're honored to have you evaluate our facilities." Trock returned the salute, impressed by the human's proper form. "The honor is mine, Colonel. I look forward to understanding your training methods." As they walked toward the main building, Trock noticed the cadets exercising in the distance. They were running in formation, carrying heavy packs in the morning heat. Nothing unusual there, endurance training was universal. "We'll start with our basic training facilities," Miller explained. "Then move on to our advanced combat simulations. We've prepared demonstrations of our training methods." The first stop was a large indoor training hall. Cadets were paired off, engaged in what Trock recognized as hand-to-hand combat training. He watched with mild interest until one cadet executed a move that made his inner eyelids snap open in surprise. The cadet had been knocked down by a larger opponent, but instead of yielding, they had somehow used their falling momentum to flip their attacker over. Both cadets immediately sprang back up, neither showing signs of injury despite the hard landing. "Impressive recovery," Trock commented. "Your species seems to have remarkable durability." Miller nodded. "Humans have dense bone structure and highly efficient healing. What might be a serious injury for other species is often just a bruise for us." Trock made a mental note. He had known humans were classified as a Death World species, evolving on a high-gravity planet with numerous predators, but seeing their physical capabilities in person was different from reading reports. As they continued the tour, Trock began noticing more concerning details. The obstacle courses weren't just challenging, they were brutal by galactic standards. Cadets crawled under razor wire through mud, scaled towering walls, and navigated water hazards that would have drowned most species. Yet they seemed to treat it as routine. Even more alarming was their attitude toward what the humans called stress training. Trock watched as instructors subjected cadets to sleep deprivation, extreme weather conditions, and psychological pressure that bordered on torture by Federation standards. Instead of breaking, the cadets appeared to grow more focused, more determined. By midday, Trock felt a creeping sensation along his spine that he hadn't experienced since his own combat days. These humans weren't just soldiers in training, they were natural warriors being honed into something even more formidable. "Is everything all right, High General?" Miller asked, noticing his silence. "You seem concerned." Trock carefully composed his expression. "Not concerned, Colonel. Just thoughtful. Shall we continue?" As they headed toward the combat simulation chambers, Trock sent a discreet message to his ship, "Priority update to Federation Command, human military capabilities may be significantly underestimated. Recommend immediate review of Alliance protocols." The combat simulation chamber looked deceptively simple, a large, empty room with dark walls. Trock had seen thousands of such facilities across the galaxy. Yet something about Colonel Miller's subtle smile made him uneasy. "We've made some modifications to standard Federation training protocols," Miller explained, leading them to an observation room overlooking the chamber. "Our cadets require additional challenges." Lieutenant Morale scoffed. "Additional challenges?" "The Federation's combat programs are designed to push soldiers to their absolute limits." "Perhaps alien limits," a new voice joined them. A weathered human instructor named Roberts stepped into the room. "But humans tend to break those limits. Watch." Below, a squad of 6 cadets entered the chamber. They carried standard Federation plasma rifles, but Trock noticed they also wore primitive projectile weapons on their hips. Curious. The simulation began. The chamber transformed into a battlefield, a ruined city under alien attack. Standard Federation training scenario THX-115, Trock recognized. He had helped design it himself. It was considered nearly impossible to complete without casualties. The human squad moved with startling efficiency. Instead of taking the prescribed defensive positions, they split into 3 pairs, using the rubble as cover while advancing toward the enemy position. Their movement patterns seemed chaotic at first, but Trock's tactical mind quickly recognized the brutal logic. They were creating multiple attack vectors while maintaining overlapping fields of fire. "Interesting approach," Trock commented, keeping his voice neutral. "But they're exposing themselves to..." His analysis was cut short as the simulation spawned a heavy assault unit. The massive holographic creature charged the nearest pair of cadets, its energy shields shrugging off their plasma fire. In any normal simulation, this would force a retreat. The humans didn't retreat. Instead, one cadet drew their primitive projectile weapon, what humans called a pistol, and fired at the creature's legs. The metal bullets couldn't penetrate its armor, but they disrupted the shield harmonics just enough. The second cadet threw something small and dark. "What are they?" Morale started to ask. The explosion that followed shook the observation room's windows. "Grenade," Roberts explained calmly. "Old technology, but effective. Shield systems have trouble with kinetic explosions." Trock's secondary heart began beating faster. The cadets had just demonstrated an exploit in Federation shield technology that he'd never considered. And they'd done it with primitive weapons. The simulation escalated. More enemies appeared, including aerial units and psychic attackers. The humans adapted instantly, using techniques that seemed to ignore every rule of conventional combat. They took hits that should have been fatal, fighting on with what the humans called adrenaline coursing through their bodies. They used the environment in ways the simulation designers had never intended, at one point deliberately collapsing a building on top of a superior force. "Stop the simulation," Trock ordered suddenly. "Sir?" Miller looked concerned. "They haven't completed the scenario yet. They've done enough." Trock's 4 eyes fixed on the colonel. "That squad just demonstrated 15 violations of Federation combat protocols, used restricted weapons technology, and exploited several previously unknown weaknesses in our defensive systems. And these are your trainees?" Miller's expression remained carefully neutral. "Yes, sir. First-year cadets, actually. Would you like to see our advanced classes?" Trock felt a cold shiver run down his spine. First-year cadets? He thought back to the message he'd sent earlier and realized it wasn't urgent enough. These humans weren't just capable soldiers, they were natural-born military geniuses with a terrifying capacity for creative violence. "Colonel," Trock said slowly, "I believe we need to have a very serious discussion about humanity's role in the Federation's military structure." "Of course, sir." Miller smiled. "But first, perhaps you'd like to see our Special Operations Training Facility? We've developed some particularly interesting techniques for zero-gravity combat." Trock noted how the colonel said, "interesting," like a predator describing its hunting grounds. For the first time in his long military career, the High General felt something close to fear. The humans weren't just joining the Federation's military. They were about to revolutionize it. The Special Operations Training Facility was located underground, accessed by a heavily secured elevator. As they descended, Trock noticed they were going much deeper than any standard Federation facility would be built. "How far down are we going?" Lieutenant Morale asked, his scales shifting color slightly, a sign of nervousness. "Just half a mile," Miller replied casually. "We found that deep rock provides the best shielding for some of our more energetic training exercises." The elevator doors opened to reveal a massive cavern. Unlike the sterile, brightly lit Federation facilities Trock was used to, this place looked like a nightmare realm. Different training zones were carved into the rock, each simulating various hostile environments. Some areas were freezing, others burning hot. There was even a pool of bubbling mud that cadets were swimming through while carrying heavy equipment. "Welcome to what our cadets call the pit," Miller said, leading them along a walkway overlooking the various training areas. "This is where we push the boundaries of human capability." Trock watched as a group of cadets practiced what appeared to be survival techniques. They were using primitive tools, pieces of string, sticks, and small metal implements, to create weapons and traps from virtually nothing. One cadet had somehow started a fire using just 2 rocks. "Impressive resourcefulness," Trock commented. "But surely in modern combat. Technology fails, High General," Roberts interrupted. "Our cadets must be able to fight and survive in any condition, with or without advanced equipment." They moved to another section where cadets were practicing in total darkness. Trock's enhanced vision could see them moving through an obstacle course while carrying wounded comrades. Instead of using night vision technology, they seemed to be navigating purely by touch and sound. "We train them to use all their senses," Miller explained. "Technology can be jammed or disabled. Human senses, properly honed, are remarkably reliable." Trock made another mental note. The Federation relied heavily on sensory enhancement technology. An enemy who could fight effectively without it would have a significant advantage. The next area made Trock stop in his tracks. Cadets were practicing what looked like urban warfare, but in a simulated zero-gravity environment. They moved with incredible precision, using minimal bursts from their thrusters to navigate between floating debris. Some were even using the recoil from their weapons to adjust their positioning. "This is impossible," Morale blurted out. "The human inner ear can't handle such maneuvers without extensive cybernetic enhancement." Miller smiled. "Actually, Lieutenant, these cadets have no enhancements at all. We've found that humans have a remarkable ability to adapt to zero-gravity conditions. Our inner ear may get confused, but our brains learn to compensate. Some of our cadets even report that zero-gravity combat feels like swimming." Trock watched as one cadet used a piece of debris as a shield, ricocheted off a wall, and launched themselves into a perfect firing position. The move would have made most species violently ill. The human didn't even seem disoriented. They proceeded to a sealed room where cadets were practicing with what appeared to be captured alien technology. Trock recognized weapons and devices from at least 6 different species. The humans weren't just learning to use them, they were modifying them, combining different technologies in ways their original designers had never intended. "Is this authorized?" Trock asked sharply. "Some of this technology is restricted by Federation law. All properly documented for training purposes," Miller assured him. "We believe our soldiers should understand both their allies' and potential enemies' capabilities. Speaking of which, would you like to see our xenobiology combat training?" Before Trock could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red lights flashed, and cadets immediately began moving with practiced efficiency. "Don't be alarmed," Miller said calmly. "This is just a surprise drill. Standard procedure, the cadets never know if an alarm is real or practice. Would you like to observe their response? Trock nodded numbly, watching as the training facility transformed into a hive of controlled chaos. These humans didn't just train for war, they lived it, breathed it, turned it into an art form. And this was just one of their many military academies. The message he needed to send to Federation Command was becoming clearer: the humans weren't just ready to join the Federation's military forces. They were ready to lead them. After the surprise drill ended, Miller led them to a section of the facility that bore warning signs in multiple galactic languages. The doors were reinforced with energy shields strong enough to contain a small explosion. "Our Xenobiology Combat Training Center," Miller explained, entering a sequence into the security panel. "We study how to effectively engage every known species in the galaxy, both allies and potential threats." The doors slid open to reveal a vast chamber divided into different environmental zones. Each zone perfectly replicated the home conditions of various alien species. Trock recognized harsh desert environments like his own homeworld, methane swamps, high-pressure chambers, and even zero-atmosphere zones. "Impressive environmental systems," Trock commented, trying to hide his unease. "But how do your cadets train in such hostile conditions?" Miller gestured toward a group of cadets entering one of the high-pressure chambers. They wore what looked like primitive diving suits, far less advanced than standard Federation environmental gear. "We believe in understanding the basics before relying on advanced technology," Miller explained. "These suits are simple, but nearly impossible to disable. No complex circuits to fail, no power systems to overload." Trock watched as the cadets began combat exercises in pressure that would crush most species. Their movements were slower than normal but demonstrated a frightening efficiency. They weren't just surviving in the hostile environment, they were learning to use it as a weapon. "And here," Robert said, leading them to another section, "is where we study alien psychology and combat responses." The room contained detailed holographic displays of various species' nervous systems, pressure points, and biological weaknesses. Trock felt his scales tighten as he recognized his own species among them. "Your kind evolved as ambush predators, General," a cadet explained, noticing his interest. She stood at attention, but her eyes showed an unsettling level of analytical focus. "Your secondary heart provides excellent stamina, but it's also a vulnerability. A precise strike here," she pointed to a spot on the hologram, "can cause temporary paralysis without permanent damage." "You teach your cadets to exploit allied species' weaknesses?" Morale asked, his voice rising slightly. "We teach them to understand all species completely," Miller corrected. "For better medical care in the field, more effective joint operations, and yes, for combat if ever necessary. Knowledge is power, Lieutenant." They moved to a section where cadets were studying alien body language and pheromone responses. Trock realized with growing alarm that humans had cataloged hundreds of subtle tells and stress indicators for each species. They could read alien emotional states better than most species could read their own. "Most interesting is how humans process fear," Roberts added, pulling up a new display. "While other species try to suppress it, we've learned to use it. Adrenaline sharpens our senses, speeds our reactions, increases our strength. What terrifies others makes us more dangerous." A demonstration area showed cadets practicing psychological warfare techniques. They were learning to use alien instincts against them, triggering fight-or-flight responses, exploiting pack mentalities, even using specific sound frequencies that could disorient certain species. "We've found that understanding xenobiology isn't just about combat," Miller continued. "It's about communication, cooperation, and yes, when necessary, confrontation. Our cadets learn to work seamlessly with alien allies while being prepared for any possible conflict." Trock watched as a team of cadets demonstrated joint combat maneuvers, perfectly accommodating their alien allies' natural movements and abilities. They anticipated their partners' needs before they arose, covered their weaknesses, and enhanced their strengths. And this is just basic training? Trock asked, already dreading the answer. Advanced cadets move on to more specialized studies, Miller confirmed. Would you like to see our xenotechnology integration program? We've made some fascinating discoveries about combining different species' technical approaches. Trock felt a deep, primal urge to flee. These humans hadn't just studied alien species, they had developed a deeper understanding of galactic life than the Federation had achieved in centuries. Their knowledge wasn't just academic, it was practical, tactical, and absolutely terrifying. He looked at his aide, noting how Morales' scales had shifted to a pale defensive color. The lieutenant had reached the same conclusion: humans weren't just good warriors. They were perfect predators who had turned the entire galaxy into their hunting ground. The Xenotechnology Integration Lab looked more like a mad scientist's workshop than a military facility. Workbenches were cluttered with dismantled alien devices, hybrid weapons, and experimental equipment that made Trock's military training scream warnings in his mind. What you're about to see is classified at the highest levels, Miller said, leading them past several security checkpoints. Even within the Federation, only a handful know about this program. Because it's illegal? Morale asked, eyeing a device that appeared to combine Nexian power cells with Drachnid focusing crystals, a combination strictly forbidden by Federation law. Because it's revolutionary, Miller corrected. Humans have a unique ability to see connections others miss. We don't just use technology, we reimagine it. They stopped at a testing chamber where cadets were working with what appeared to be standard Federation plasma rifles. But as Trock watched, one cadet removed the power core and replaced it with something much smaller. Impossible, Trock muttered. Those rifles require specific power configurations. Any modification would cause. The cadet fired. Instead of the standard plasma bolt, the weapon released a concentrated beam of energy that cut through the target like it was paper. We discovered that your power cores were actually limiting the weapon's potential, Roberts explained. By adapting Earth's primitive nuclear technology, we increased efficiency by 300% while reducing size and weight. Trock felt his headache returning. These humans hadn't just mastered alien technology, they were improving it with solutions so simple they bordered on primitive. Throughout the lab, he saw more examples: kinetic shields enhanced with old-fashioned steel plates, faster-than-light drives modified with principles from human steam engines, medical nanites reprogrammed using concepts from Earth's ancient herbal medicine. Here's something particularly interesting, Miller said, gesturing to a sealed chamber where cadets worked in protective suits. We've been exploring combinations of biological and mechanical systems. Through the window, Trock saw something that defied explanation. The cadets were growing what looked like living metal, combining organic tissue with technological components in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Your species has barely mastered space travel, Morale protested. How could you possibly? Sometimes fresh eyes see new possibilities, Miller interrupted. We don't have centuries of established doctrine telling us what's impossible. We just try things and see what works. They moved to another section where cadets were testing communication devices. Trock watched in growing horror as they demonstrated systems that could penetrate any known jamming technology, using principles based on Earth's marine life. Dolphins and whales taught us a lot about long-range communication, Roberts explained proudly. Nature solved problems billions of years ago that we're just now understanding. The final demonstration involved what looked like a simple metal sphere. A cadet placed it on the floor, and it split into dozens of smaller units that skittered away like insects. Swarm technology, Miller explained. Based on ant colonies. Each unit is simple, but together they form a complex intelligence that can adapt to any situation. Perfect for reconnaissance, sabotage, or defense. Trock had seen enough. These humans weren't just advancing technology, they were completely rewriting the rules of warfare. Their so-called primitive perspective had allowed them to see possibilities that more advanced civilizations had overlooked for millennia. One last thing, Miller said, leading them to a heavily secured door. This is our temporal mechanics lab. Temporal. Trock felt his blood run cold. Time travel research is forbidden by every law in the galaxy. Miller smiled that predatory smile again. We prefer to think of it as being prepared for every possibility. After all, if time travel exists, someone will eventually use it as a weapon. Shouldn't we be ready? Trock looked at the humans around him, these creatures who had taken every rule, every limitation, every established doctrine of warfare, and turned them upside down. They hadn't just adapted to join the galactic community, they had already begun reshaping it to suit their needs. The message he needed to send to Federation Command was now crystal clear: the humans weren't just a new military force. They were an extinction-level event waiting to happen. Back in his temporary quarters at the Academy, Trock paced restlessly. The sun had set hours ago, but sleep was impossible. His mind kept replaying everything he'd witnessed: the combat simulations, the special operations training, the xenobiology studies, and those terrifying technological innovations. Lieutenant Morrell sat at a desk, trying to organize their findings into a coherent report. "Sir, what exactly should I tell Command? That the humans are too dangerous to join our military? Or that we're too afraid to reject them?" Trock stopped pacing. "Both statements are true, and that's what terrifies me most." A knock at the door interrupted them. Colonel Miller stood there, still impeccably uniformed despite the late hour. "I thought you might have trouble sleeping, General. Perhaps a final tour would help put things in perspective?" Against his better judgment, Trock agreed. They walked through the quiet Academy grounds, their path lit by Earth's single moon. Cadets were still training in the distance, their shadows moving with predatory grace across the nighttime obstacle courses. "You're afraid of us," Miller said. It wasn't a question. "Wouldn't you be?" Trock replied. "In one day, I've seen your people demonstrate the ability to revolutionize or destroy everything the Federation has built over millennia." Miller nodded. "We know how we appear to other species. Aggressive. Unpredictable. Dangerous. But consider this: in our entire history, humans have never united so completely as we have since joining the Federation." They stopped at a memorial garden. Holographic images showed Earth's past wars, countless conflicts that had shaped human history. "We fought ourselves far more brutally than we ever fought aliens," Miller continued. "But now we have something greater to strive for. The Federation isn't just an alliance to us, it's a chance to be part of something larger than our tribal instincts." Trock considered this. "Yet you prepare for war with terrifying efficiency." "We prepare for everything," Miller corrected. "Including peace. Look there." He pointed to another part of the Academy where cadets were learning alien languages, studying xenocultural relations, practicing diplomatic protocols. "Every cadet here spends as much time learning to prevent wars as to fight them. We study combat because we must, but we dream of exploration, cooperation, discovery. That's why we want to join the Federation's military, not to dominate, but to protect." Trock watched the cadets training in the moonlight. He saw their dedication, their discipline, but also something he'd missed before: hope. These humans weren't training to conquer the galaxy. They were training to defend it. "There's something else you should see," Miller said, leading them to a small building near the memorial garden. Inside, Trock found himself in a room full of alien artifacts, not weapons or technology, but art, music, literature from across the galaxy. "Every cadet studies these," Miller explained. "We believe understanding beauty is as important as understanding battle. A soldier who can't appreciate what they're protecting isn't a protector at all." Trock picked up a piece of art from his own homeworld, a delicate crystal sculpture that captured the dawn light. A human cadet had been studying it, learning to appreciate its subtle beauty. Finally, Trock understood. Yes, Humans were terrifying in their capacity for violence, their ability to adapt, their drive to push every boundary. But they were equally capable of love, wonder, and sacrifice for a greater cause. He turned to Miller. "I know what to tell Federation Command." "And what's that, General?" "The truth. That humans are the most dangerous species we've ever encountered, and exactly what the Federation needs. Your people don't just think outside the box, you don't even see the box. You'll change everything about how we operate, how we think, how we defend ourselves. And that's precisely why we need you." Miller smiled, but this time Trock didn't see it as predatory. It was the smile of someone who had been understood at last. "Welcome to the Federation Military Academy, General," Miller said, extending his hand in the human gesture of friendship. "We look forward to learning from you as much as you'll learn from us." Trock took the offered hand, noting how the human carefully moderated his grip to avoid harming him. In that simple gesture, he saw the truth about humanity. They were capable of both tremendous violence and tremendous restraint, and their true strength lay in knowing when to use each. The sun began to rise over the academy, casting long shadows across the grounds. Somewhere in the distance, cadets began their morning training, their voices raised in songs of brotherhood that transcended species. Trock realized he was witnessing not the end of the Federation as he knew it, but its evolution into something far greater than anyone had imagined possible. And for the first time since arriving on Earth, he wasn't afraid anymore.